Peace and blessings. This is Misal Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again with another episode of Raw Talk. And today we're going to talk about the current crime wave, may I say, in America, and what are the supernatural causes for the crime wave. Plus, we'll be talking about a true manifestation of spiritual power. Um, so first, I want to talk about, how I got inspired to deal with this theme about the crime wave and its, how the supernatural world has affected it. And it basically came from, and you could probably find in some of my videos that we had did a Reiki marathon during the height of the COVID um, pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, actually. And what happened was, I had a group of people, and what we'll do is like we'll visualize the earth and send Reiki to it. So I was working on this exercise for like about 3 days, and then one night I had this dream, very lucid dream, where I was in like this barn, and there was a door open. Like I was looking at this door, and it was like a lot of light, and I saw this figure. It was like a shadow with eyes trying to reach out to her. And in the dream, I'm like, yo, is this the COVID? You know what I mean? Because I didn't know what the COVID was. Um, but I get into that. I was told about COVID before the pandemic happened. So I'll get to that later on in the video. But what happened was, this thing is like, trying to touch me, and I back it up and everything like that. And I wake up and like, man, what's that? You know what I'm saying? And then after like about 20 minutes, I realized that that was a disincarnate soul. And that's what's going on with the crime, is that you had a lot of people who died suddenly, regardless of what people think about the COVID, the pandemic, the conspiracy theories and the political issues, people died. So that's real, you know. At one time, I had a couple of friends who lived outside the state of New York calling me, is this really going on? And I would get an ambulance, like every like 15 minutes, literally, because I don't live too far from a hospital. And it was a lot of people leaving. So how does this influence the uprising crime in America? And this is really the prophecy that unfortunately came true that I discussed in another video when I was interviewing a political candidate that you could find in the videos or whatever. But long story short is basically a lot of those souls that passed are disincarnate and they're earthbound. And what happens is that they are recruited by what in some traditions what they call badger spirits, and these are energies that prey upon men. So it's sort of it's a gangster spirits, where the disincarnate souls, they're in a new state of being. They're in a halfway state of being also, because they're not really into where they're destined to go. And that's why I saw the shadowy figure, because a lot of times shamans, one of the responsibilities of shamans is to guide souls back to where they're supposed to go, right? So that's why I was able to assess what was going on after like about 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But in any case, let me just say this, like, at the same time, it's sort of interesting because these souls, they're not into where they need to go to. They're sort of like in limbo. And what happens is the badger spirits now utilize them, to do their dirty work, just like it is in the street life, in the gang life, which they influence also normally. But in this case, they got like all these extra souls that they can tell to go out and to inspire fear amongst men and then feed off the energy. That's basically why crime is going up. Additionally, You have the legalization of marijuana, which cannabis in ancient times, it was utilized to get into a trance state, um, to interpret things from the spiritual world. So if that person is tapping into, and they may not even know what they're tapping into, it just feels good because the sensations are great. Hey, it's natural. It is what it is. But at the same time, if they're not conscious of those things, or if they're poorly influenced, then they can leave their mind open for now these newly recruited energies to come in. And what you find is people commit suicide. You find people, um, jumping in front of trains, being pushed in front of trains, women being attacked. All that stuff is signs of negative energies. And unfortunately, in the era of the new age, nobody knows how to combat this, right? Nobody knows how to combat this. Like years ago, people want to live near a church or a school. Why? Because the bell would ring. The church bell would ring, on the corners, like, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. School bell rings, kids are coming to school. You don't even hear the school bell ring no more. Schools even changed. But the reason why people want to live in those communities years ago, like, hey, I want to live near a school, I want to live near a church, is because the bell would ring, and bells, and this is like public knowledge, bells dispel negative energy. Maybe on a minute level, but that's what it was. Now we live in a society where all these people have all these channels about all sorts of crazy types of spirituality, and no one on these channels is talking about exorcism because that's what's going to make society better. Is the power of exorcism. In most traditions, whether it's Shinto, the ATRs, the African traditional spirituality, or religions, as some people say, Native American shamanism, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, it all falls down to one thing, and that is cleanliness is what allows your inner spirit to grow. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of people get caught up in the special effects, the tricks, all that sort of thing, but really, it's all about developing and growing spiritually. But cleanliness is important. Once you learn the routines and methods of cleanliness, whether it's herbal baths, whether it's smudge sticks, whether it's incantations, certain novenas that are done for protection, dispel negative energy, that should be done constantly. Then your community will evolve and change, and that's the true manifestation of spiritual power. Any other thing outside of that is just like someone with a clasped ego who doesn't know what he's doing or she, or just some new ager who's living in their imagination, and pretending to be an elitist. Where you have these people who have, this distinction, and I've been around it on some levels where they're doing this and they're doing that, but you never see these people working in the environment of people who really need upliftment and poor communities. They have all this context, quote unquote, with the creator of the universe, and they can't even like reach out to people who are disenfranchised. Instead, they look down upon them. So they become the new clergy. The New Age movement, in a lot of ways, is the new clergy, pro and con. You see what I'm saying? Because if it's really about changing stuff, in your environment that they claim to do, then you will go to other environments and try to help reach out to those people and teach. Even if like a person's like a yoga teacher, have a class where you reach out to other communities and say, hey, come to this class. Make it available for people, who may not be aware of it. Maybe they may not be aware of the benefits and stuff like that. And that's the true spiritual power. It's not, you know, trying to put somebody in the ground or throwing all sorts of stupid stuff out. that eventually will affect the generations that come after you. But it's more or less of being able to heal your community, change your community, and preserve your community through rites of cleanliness and exorcism. But ultimately, that's why the world is going in the state that it's going into, because there's no one doing exorcisms. They're just calling on quote unquote deities asking for stuff. It's crazy. Let me just get a little bit of this coffee or tea, coffee, whatever. And that's just, check out this logo right here. It's one of my favorite. The sister puts these together. It's really cool. She got a whole line of stuff like this. So I just try to, reach out, support, and I just believe in the product. So, but that's the reason why, a lot of this stuff is going on. And it goes on through nature. You could see it like with the parasite insect relationships of, some of the ways that they're able, these parasites, make a long story short, a lot of these parasites get into the bodies of insects. There was one story I was reading about, like a tapeworm, and I think I mentioned this in another video, a tapeworm that, excuse me, that gets into the body of a grasshopper. It's very slim, slimmer than a thread of hair, and it needs to lay eggs in water. So what it would do, it would change the proteins in the grasshopper's brain, and all of a sudden the grasshopper will go into to a body of water, jump in and commit suicide. And the worm will escape and lay the eggs that it needs to lay. Okay, so when you apply that to human beings, there are things outside of our normal sensory perception, right? A lot of times spiritualists are able to activate these things. And these things are influencing mankind in a negative way. So people walking around like, man, why are people bugging out and going crazy? There's another reason why that occurs, which I'll get into in another video. It's primarily based upon entertainment. But in a lot of ways, it's like these energies of this, deceased, um, the amount of people who are deceased around the world is going to perpetrate crime everywhere because some of them are still in limbo and they're utilized by negative energy. So basically, the way we reduce crime is through banishing those negative energies. So spiritualists who are really serious about their craft, they should be aware of this and they should be working towards that direction. And I think over time, once that awakens in people, even maybe on some aspects in some religious leaders, then we'll be able to move on. But other than that, it will increase because the consciousness of people and their spiritual practices actually are not in a good lane, and that needs to change. So hopefully that will. In the upcoming year, I'll be leading some projects that people could participate in, the viewers can participate in to help change that, what I'm saying, so that, they can dispel negative energy in their own community and abroad. But that's what has to happen, you know. Um, and this is the supernatural cause of why crime in America has gone up, not only America, but other places, but America specifically because of the dynamics that are going on, you know. And I'll dig a little bit more deeper into that in an upcoming video. But also, too, while we're on this topic, I did, as the title mentions, want to talk about the root of spiritual power and just make clear that really the root of spiritual power is being able to transform the area in which you live and the community in which you live. That's one of the biggest roots of spiritual power. It's not, all sorts of crazy acts or, the harm you could do to other people and all that kind of stuff. Living like it's might is right. It's the book is name. But primarily it's about healing people. healing your community, and healing your own soul. You know what I'm saying? That's the key or sign of spiritual power. The perspective that we have is the biggest sign. And people who lose sight of that, it may appear that they're winning, but in a lot of different ways they're losing. So I think that humanity can change that, just having the awareness of the situation that they're in. So if you like what we have to say in the video, please press like, subscribe. Let's conversate, let's politic, let's try to make this world a better place. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again for another episode of War Talk. Have a good night.